Noam Chomsky was born on the 7th of December, 1928, in Philadelphia, USA, in a Jewish intellectual family. His father, William Chomsky, was a Hebrew scholar who was considered an expert in medieval language and grammar. His mother, Elsie Chomsky, was a social activist. The home environment was academic and politically aware. Chomsky's parents inspired him to think and learn independently. Their home was full of books and discussions. He learned the balance between cultural identity and intellectual freedom through his family. William Chomsky's linguistic background shaped his early curiosity. Elsie's activism gave him sensitivity towards social justice and equality. Philadelphia's multicultural and politically active environment also influenced him, saw issues of equality and discrimination in his childhood itself. This observation became the foundation of his later political thoughts. Being part of a living community, he learned about discrimination and identity. Chomsky took admission in the University of Pennsylvania for linguistic studies. Here, his inclination towards linguistic theory and philosophical questions increased. Despite being bored with traditional education, he adopted the approach of self-study and independent research. This approach is visible in the core principles of his career. In the university, he got the opportunity to be mentored by Jelling Harris. Harris was a renowned linguist who had worked in structural linguistics and political philosophy. Through Harris, he understood the relationship between the structure of language and politics. This mentorship became a turning point in the development of his linguistic theory and political ideas. Chomsky's academic focus was on theories of language. He started looking at language as a mathematical and cognitive system. At this time, his interest also increased in rationalism and classical texts of philosophy. All these things became the foundation of his research. Apart from Harris, Chomsky also got exposed to the active political culture of Philadelphia. Here he also got an exposure to anarchism, and he explored ideas like socialism. These influences became the base of his political philosophy. Chomsky's thought process was deeply influenced by rational philosophy and anarchism. Rational philosophy says that the origin of knowledge is in human reasoning. Chomsky, he integrated the ideas of rational philosophers such as Descartes and Spinoza into his linguistic and cognitive theory. Chomsky believed that the human mind works through an innate structure. This idea comes from the core of rational thought. It inspired him to develop the concept of universal grammar. Apart from rationalism, he also understood the empirical methods, but his focus was more on theory building and logical analysis. In political thought, he took inspiration from anarchism and Marxism. Anarchism believes that centralized power systems work against natural human freedom. Chomsky says that a decentralized and cooperative society is more ethical and functional. This influence is clearly visible in his political writings. He adopted the perspective of understanding these inequalities and power dynamics from Marxism. Chomsky did not accept the Marxist dogmas. He made a distinction between individual freedom and collective action. What created the balance his intellectual thought was a blend of classical philosophy, modern linguistics, and political critique. This influence is visible throughout his career. During his days at the University of Pennsylvania, Chomsky felt dissatisfaction with the traditional grammar system. Structural linguistics, which was dominant at that time, was limited to understanding only surface-level patterns. Chomsky believed that the real essence of language is hidden in its underlying instructions. Challenging the traditional systems, he started developing the concept of transformational grammar. The basis of this theory was that human language is an innate system that works on universal rules. He explained that every language has some common principles which are related to the cognitive structure of the mind. His research focus was on linguistic creativity. He asked how a human being can create an infinite number of sentences through limited vocabulary and grammar rules. To answer this question, he proposed the framework of transformational generative grammar. Chomsky's theory established linguistics. As a scientific and cognitive science discipline, his approach creates a balance of theories. This transition was the turning point in his career, in which he defined a new linguistic paradigm, if major contribution to, if we talk about linguistics. The first thing that comes is transformational grammar and syntax. Noam Chomsky's biggest contribution is his transformational generative grammar theory. This theory proposes a new way to understand the structure of language. Before this, linguistics was limited to surface-level patterns and descriptive frameworks. Chomsky showed that the real meaning of language lies in its deep structure and transformation rules. Chomsky says that the structure of human language is a combination of deep structure and surface structure. Surface structure is what we speak and hear. Deep structure is an abstract form that defines the meaning and syntax rules of that sentence. He explained how the surface structure of a sentence is derived from the deep structure. This process happens through transformation rules. For example, the boy is eating the apple is a deep structure, and if passive rule is applied in transformation, then the surface structure becomes the apple is being eaten by the boy. These transformation rules are universal and are found in some form or the other in every language. Chomsky's argument was that transformation rules are innate, meaning that every human mind has a pre-programmed ability that can understand the rules of language. His claim was that this ability is evolutionary and is found only in humans. Chomsky's universal grammar concept was a revolution in the understanding of language. He said that there are some basic rules behind every language, which are pre-installed in every human mind. Universal grammar means that all the languages of the world have some shared patterns and principles in their structure. This theory explains how a child learns his native language so easily. Chomsky says that this process does not happen just by exposure. Children have a language acquisition device, i.e. lead. This lead gives them the innate ability to understand and apply grammatical rules. A simple example of universal grammar can be seen in the syntax of all languages. Languages have certain rules for sentence formation. For example, subject-verb-object order is found in English and Hindi. She eats an apple. Subject-object-verb. Order is found in Japanese and Korean. The difference between these two systems is cultural and regional, but not grammatically significant. Fundamental principles are universal. Chomsky proved that despite the differences in languages, their base is the same. Transformation grammar was not just a linguistic theory but a scientific approach. It defined language as a cognitive process. Chomsky says that language is an evolutionary adaptation. It is a part of the cognitive structure of the human mind. Practical application of this theory is seen in computational linguistics and artificial intelligence. Chomsky's grammar concept is used to train natural language processing (NLP) systems in machines, for example search engines and virtual assistants. Chomsky's work builds a bridge between theories and sciences. Noam Chomsky's biggest contribution is to understand that language is a unique human ability. He proposed the theory that every human being has an innate capacity that helps in understanding and learning language. This concept is called universal grammar. Chomsky says there are some universal principles behind every language in the world. Whether a person speaks English, Hindi, or Japanese, his brain processes the rules of language in the same way. These principles are innate, meaning we are born with this capacity. Raised a basic question. How is it possible for a child to learn to speak his native language fluently at such a young age despite limited input? The behaviorist argument was that language is a habit formation process that happens through mimicry and repetition. Chomsky rejected this approach, said that language is a creative process that is not limited to mere memory. Noam Chomsky's contribution to cognitive science goes beyond his linguistic theory. His concept of verbal grammar provides a cognitive framework that helps in understanding the functions of the mind and the brain. He formed a major part of the cognitive revolution. Behaviorism was dominant at the beginning of the 20th century. Behaviorists used to say that the human mind is a blank slate. A tabula rasa is a system that is shaped through environment and conditioning. Chomsky challenged this idea. He argued that the mind is a modular system, meaning that the human brain has specific areas dedicated to particular functions. One area is dedicated to language acquisition. It is necessary to have a specialized mechanism. This idea is accepted in the frameworks of today's cognitive science and neuroscience. A major section of Chomsky's theory was on language acquisition. He explained the language learning process of children through the poverty of stimulation. He said that the linguistic input available to a child cannot explain his complete language ability. Whatever the child learns is possible due to the innate structure of his brain. Another important question of Chomsky in cognitive science is his focus that language is a computational system, meaning that language processing follows a systematic and logical structure. His work also became a blueprint for researchers in neuroscience and psychology. He explained the relationship between language and cognition, in which the brain has an active role. Modern MRI and fMRI studies validated that language is produced in specific areas of the brain, such as Broca and Wonky regions. Chomsky's concept of behaviorism against critique. One of his most impactful contributions is, behaviorism states that human behavior is an outcome of stimuli in responses to the environment. Language was also considered a behavioristic habit formation process. B.F. Skinner, a leading theorist of behaviorism, claimed in his book Verbal Behavior that language is a conditioned response. Chomsky rejected Skinner's ideas. He argued that language cannot be the result of imitation and reinforcement alone. Children create new and unique sentences that they have never heard before. This creative ability would be impossible if language were just mimicry. One of Chomsky's major focuses in political philosophy was media and propaganda. He explained how media becomes a tool of control for powerful entities. His book Manufacturing Consent, which he wrote with Edward S. Herman, is a foundational text for understanding the dynamics of media manufacturing consent, published in 1988. It shows that the real role of the media is not to provide information, but to serve the interests of the ruling class. Chomsky and Herman proposed the propaganda model to understand the behavior of the media. Through this model, they explained how media institutions work under economic and political pressures. According to the propaganda model, the purpose of the media is to shape public opinion. The shaping takes place according to the interests of the ruling elite. Chomsky and Herman say that the content of the media passes through filters that distort the truth. What are these filters? Chomsky identifies 5 major filters. Music media organizations are within large corporations whose motive is profit. Advertisements are the revenue source of media, so their preferences influence the content. The media primarily depends on government and corporate sources that provide biased information. Criticism and pressure tactics prevent media outlets from publishing content against the ruling powers. Propaganda, especially against communism, dominates the media narrative. The objective of this model was to show how the mainstream media controls public discourse and suppresses dissenting voices. Chomsky says he argues that media is not just a neutral information provider, it is an idea tool that maintains the status quo. Media is considered an important pillar of democracy, but Chomsky argues that the structure of media undermines its objectivity. Instead of providing information, the role of media becomes to spread misinformation. Chomsky's example can be taken from the media coverage of Vietnam War and Iraq War. He showed how media used reporting to justify the motives of war. Media minimized atrocities and amplified the narrative of the government. Another critical point of Chomsky is the agenda-setting function. Media does not just provide information, but decides on which issue the public discourse should focus. This decision is made according to the interests of the elites. Chomsky says that this control is subtle, but its impact is deep and far-reaching. His critique is a wake-up call for media consumers. Chomsky's criticism is that he explains that it is important to analyze media content with critical thinking. Understanding the bases and motives behind every story is essential for public empowerment. One of Noam Chomsky's major critiques has been on the deep interconnections between state power and corporations. He believes that even in modern times, the nexus of state and corporate interests works against public welfare. He called this the corporate-state complex. Chomsky argues that governments and corporations pursue a shared agenda. This agenda helps them consolidate economic and political power. Issues of public interest, such as education, healthcare, and environmental protection, become secondary to them. Chomsky argues that policies focus not on ordinary people but on the profits and control of the elite class. He also highlights the link between the defense industry and corporate funding. Chomsky says that war and military intervention are often driven by economic motives. Defense contractors and corporations lobby for military budgets. Governments support them, even if the cost is borne by the civilian population. An example is Iraq. Chomsky showed how oil corporations and the military-industrial complex were thriving. They were justified in the public interest, but the real beneficiaries were the corporations that were profiting from oil contracts and defense contracts. The media works to hide the connections from the public eye. The filters of Chomsky's propaganda model, such as ownership and advertising, control this narrative. The media supports the alliance of the state and corporations and suppresses dissenting voices. The central aspect of Chomsky's political critique is understanding global inequalities. He argues that global economic systems perpetuate power imbalances. Wealth and resources are controlled by developed nations and corporations, while developing countries become victims of exploitation. He also highlights the exploitation that takes place in the name of globalization. Globalization theories practically serve the interests of the rich and corporations. The resources and labor of poor nations are exploited, but the elite powers benefit from it. Chomsky has also criticized the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and World Bank. Institutions were criticized. These institutions supposedly work for global economic stability, but their policies put underdeveloped nations in debt traps. Structural adjustment programs force developing nations to privatize their natural resources and cut social spending. Another critical point is labor. Exploitation. Multinational corporations use developing countries for cheap labor. Chomsky says that this process compromises the rights and dignity of workers. In the pursuit of cheap production and profit maximization, corporations do not pay attention to the needs and environment of local communities. He also emphasized the importance of grassroots movements and local resistance. Chomsky says that systemic change will come only when common people understand their rights and responsibilities and take organized action. Another important aspect of Noam Chomsky's political philosophy is anarchism. But his anarchism is different and nuanced from the traditional anarchist movement. Chomsky sees anarchism as a moral and social philosophy which focuses on human freedom and dignity. While defining anarchism, he said that anarchism aims to challenge all forms of human authority, meaning the main focus of anarchism is centralized power structures and operational systems need to be dismantled. Chomsky believes that society should be organized in a way where decision-making is decentralized. Every individual and community should have their own solutions to their own issues. A significant aspect of Chomsky's anarchism is workers' control. He believes that the decision power in the workplace should be in the hands of workers, not corporate managers or board members. This idea is inspired by the principle of syndicalism, which talks about democratic control of production and management. The critique of war and economic equality is prominent in Chomsky's political writings. He has consistently criticized war, especially those wars that fought for economic gains. His critique of the Vietnam War and the Iraq War is an example of his anti-war stance. He argues that the real purpose of war is to control resources and geopolitical power. The public is given control over the war in the name of national security and democracy. But it is misled. Chomsky says that war serves only corporate profits and elite interests, while its cost is borne by common people and soldiers. His analysis of economic equality is deep and critical. He says that global wealth distribution is so unequal that billionaires have more resources than billionaires of people. This equality, the root cause of human rights violations, is capital systems and their exploitative structures, according to him. Chomsky's focus on human rights violations is how states and corporations exploit vulnerable populations for their own interests. His work exposes how poverty, displacement, and violence are normalized. Noam Chomsky's contribution to academic disciplines is a major aspect of his multifaceted career. His work in linguistics, philosophy, and media studies is considered the foundation. Chomsky transformed linguistics from a descriptive science to a theoretical and cognitive discipline. His universal grammar theory and transformational generative grammar framework propose a new model for the study of language. His work is used to understand the universal patterns of every language and to decode the innate processes of language learning. Modern computational linguistics and language pedagogy are incomplete without his theory. Chomsky's work has given rise to rationalism, and modern he built a bridge between philosophy and philosophy. His focus was on the net nature of human cognition and language, which is an extension of the ideas of Descartes and Kant in philosophical inquiry. He emphasized the biological basis of knowledge and understanding. His influence is still visible in the frameworks of cognitive science and analytical philosophy. His book, Manufacturing Consent, is a foundation text in media studies. His analysis of the dynamics of media bias and propaganda inspires critical thought for media students and professionals. Ideas provide a lens through which they can make a deeper critique of the media. His interdisciplinary approach is an example for academic disciplines of how a single thinker can revolutionize multiple fields. That's all for today. We will meet you again in a new episode with a new topic.